Okay, we are standing by for the feed from the White House. President Trump is scheduled to address the nation tonight, and we have not really been given any indication of what he plans on talking about. No real indication on what he plans to talk about. However, there has been some indication from the White House that the president does plan to talk about his plans for 2026. Now, obviously, this comes at a time where the president is facing deep unpopularity, even among many Republicans that are being polled. His approval ratings on the economy in a recent poll down to 33%. Now, this was one of the main reasons that he won election. He's even underwater on immigration, largely over the tactics used for the forced deportation of people either living in the country for many years or some living in the country legally that have had their legal processes stopped and then deported on the spot. So sharply declining poll numbers for the president. There was some concern that maybe there would be an announcement of some type of military action in Venezuela. That does not appear to be the case beyond what the president announced yesterday regarding a blockade of Venezuela, which is considered to be an act of war, but that has not led to any actual military conflict. The Venezuelan government is calling it a blatant attack on their sovereignty, saying that the Trump administration has made no small terms of the fact that this isn't about fighting drug use. This is about seizing the country's massive oil reserves. That the claim from the Venezuelan government. But again, it doesn't appear that we're going to get any announcement specifically on military action on that. However, we don't really know. No excerpts have been released from what the president plans to say, but there are indications that tonight's speech will focus on what he's looking at accomplishing next year in 2026. Of course, a pivotal year. It's a midterm year. Parties in power, those that control the White House and Congress, tend to lose seats in Congress during a midterm, and this one could be especially bad as Republican poll numbers are extremely underwater on many of the issues that they campaigned on and won on just last year, including the economy and immigration, as well as inflation, which has begun to tick back up after many of the president's tariffs took effect earlier this year. Um, so beyond that, we don't really have a lot of information. Now, when they say that the president is going to address the nation at 8 o'clock tonight, generally that means about 8:01:30 or 8:02 to give the networks a chance to do their introduction at the top of the hour for their special report. So that is when we expect the president and the feed for the president's live feed to come on. And that is what we're standing by for now. Again, if you have any questions about what the president may be talking about, looks like the feed is up. We don't have an image, but we do have the feed up. If there's anything, comments, feel free to share them in the chat. We'd love to hear them. As always, liking this video, subscribing to the channel is the best way of supporting us as we try and do more coverage like this in the future. I'll go ahead and give you a shot. This is still getting things set up here on our end. This is the live feed from the White House now with their slate now up saying that the speech will begin shortly. Again, the president scheduled to speak at 8 o'clock. Generally, that means about 8:02 for the networks to break into a regular programming and to introduce the president. That is what we're expecting here in the next few minutes. In the meantime, feel free to share your comments as well as any thoughts you have about what the president may or may not be talking about in his speech tonight. We're going ahead and switch back to the slate here as we stand by for the president to begin speaking here again. That appears to be ready to go here in about 3.5 to 4 minutes. The president should begin his address. Again, they do give him about 90 to 120 seconds after the top of the hour for the networks to break into coverage and begin their and to toss to the president. Unclear if this is going to be from the Oval Office. Some of these had been done from the East Room. Of course, the East Wing is gone. So we will see where he delivers this. But again, we don't have any indication that there's going to be an announcement of military action against Venezuela. We do appear to think that tonight's address will focus on priorities for action next year by the president after, which will all be in the light of a very, very what could be a difficult midterm for Republicans. The Republicans lost dozens of seats in 2018 as the president's popularity waned, but that was still in a time of a relatively healthy economy. That is not the case today. Job losses are growing, inflation is ticking back up. Farmers were recently bailed out with billions of dollars, so there is a lot of disapproval right now over the president's economic policies of the last 10, 11 months or so since taking office in January. So we'll see what the president has to say about that. There were reports the president may also announce a $1,776 stimulus check to service members. There had been talk in the past claiming that there'd be several $1,000s of stimulus sent to all tax-paying Americans. There has been no talk of that in recent days as the tens of billions of dollars has been collected by the federal government in tariffs that are largely paid by consumers and companies here in the United States, but nothing that would rise to the level the president was looking for in order to pay for massive tax refunds. So right now we are at 8 o'clock. It is the top of the hour. The president should begin speaking here in about a minute or two. We will switch to that feed when it comes in. Again, feel free as the president's talking to share your comments in the chat. We're going to go ahead and silence my microphone and let the president speak, and then we'll join you back here once the speech has ended at the White House. So right now we are about a minute away from President Trump beginning his speech in the Oval Office. Excuse me, I believe it's in the Oval Office. I don't believe we've gotten confirmation of that yet. But we will find out here momentarily where the president is speaking from. He has done Oval Office addresses in the past. I don't recall if he's done any yet in this term, but this will be his first major address on network television in quite some time, instead opting usually for addressing the media in scrums as well as at rallies across the country. We should be seeing the feed from the White House popping up here shortly. And we should see the president pop up here in about 15 seconds. As long as everything is on time. I haven't gotten any word that anything is delayed. Generally, they have to keep these pretty strict with requesting network time for these addresses. It is now 8:02. We still have not seen the president. It's a little unusual. I guess I didn't check to see if the broadcast networks were taking this feed. Generally, they do. However, if this is considered to be simply a policy or campaign speech, oh, here we go.
A mess, and I'm fixing it. When I took office, inflation was the worst in 48 years. And millions of Americans. This happened during a Democrat administration, and it's when we first began hearing the word affordability. Our border was open, and because of this, our country was being invaded by an army of 25 million people, many who came from prisons and jails, mental institutions, and insane asylums. They were drug dealers, gang members, and even 11,888 murderers, more than 50% of whom killed more than one person. This is what the Biden administration allowed to happen to our country, and it can never be allowed to happen again. We had men playing in women's sports, transgender for everybody, crime at record levels with law enforcement, and words such as that just absolutely forbidden. We had the worst trade deals ever made, and our country was laughed at from all over the world. But they're not laughing anymore. Over the past 11 months, we have brought more positive change to Washington than any administration in American history. There's never been anything like it, and I think most would agree. I was elected in a landslide, winning the popular vote and all 7 swing states and everything else, with a mandate to take on a sick and corrupt system that really just took the wealth from people and crushed the dreams of the American people. For the last 4 years, the United States was ruled by politicians who fought only for insiders, illegal aliens, career criminals, corporate lobbyists, prisoners, terrorists, and above all, foreign nations, which took advantage of us at levels never seen before. They flooded your cities and towns with illegal aliens. They decimated your hard-earned savings. They indoctrinated your children with hate for America. They just released a level of violent felons that we had never seen to prey on innocent. They caused war. They caused mayhem. They caused a horrible situation all over the globe. But now you have a president who fights for the law-abiding, hardworking people of our country, the ones who make this nation run, who make this nation work. And after just 1 year, we have achieved more than anyone could have imagined. Starting on day one, I took immediate action to stop the invasion of our southern border. For the past 7 months, 0 illegal aliens have been allowed into our country, a feat which everyone said was absolutely impossible. Do you remember when Joe Biden said that he needed Congress to pass legislation to help close the border? He was always blaming Congress and everyone else. As it turned out, we didn't need legislation. We just needed a new president. We inherited the worst border anywhere in the world, and we quickly turned it into the strongest border in the history of our country. In other words, in a few short months, we went from worst to best. We're deporting criminals, restoring safety to our most dangerous cities. Just take a look at Washington, D.C. It's at levels of safety that we've never seen before. And they decimated the bloodthirsty foreign drug cartels. We did that all by ourselves with our people, and we're so proud of it because they were poisoning and destroying our population. Drugs brought in by ocean and by sea are now down 94%. We have broken the grip of sinister woke radicals in our schools, and control over those schools is back now in the hands of our great and loving states where education belongs. After rebuilding the United States military in my first term, and with the addition we are adding right now, we have the most powerful military anywhere in the world, and it's not even close. I've restored American strength, settled 8 wars in 10 months, destroyed the Iran nuclear threat, and ended the war in Gaza, bringing for the first time in 3,000 years peace to the Middle East, and secured the release of the hostages, both living and dead. Here at home, we're bringing our economy back from the brink of ruin. The last administration and their allies in Congress looted our Treasury for trillions of dollars, driving up prices and everything at levels never seen before. I am bringing those high prices down and bringing them down very fast. Let's look at the facts. Under the Biden administration, car prices rose 22%, and in many states, 30% or more. Gasoline rose 30 to 50%. Hotel rates rose 37%. Airfares rose 31%. Now, under our leadership, they are all coming down and coming down fast. Democrat politicians also sent the cost of groceries soaring, but we are solving that too. The price of a Thanksgiving turkey was down 33% compared to the Biden last year. The price of eggs is down 82% since March, and everything else is falling rapidly. And it's not done yet, but boy, are we making progress. Nobody can believe what's going on. Here are just some of the efforts that we have underway. You will see in your wallets and bank accounts in the new year. After years of record-setting falling incomes, our policies are boosting take-home pay at a historic pace. Under Biden, real wages plummeted by $3,000. Under Trump, the typical factory worker has seen a wage increase of $1,300. For construction workers, it's $1,800. For miners, we're bringing back clean, beautiful coal. It's $3,300. And for the first time in years, wages are rising much faster than inflation. Remember that. The wages, just look at it. Wages are going up much faster than inflation. How big is that? Very importantly, there are more people working today than at any time in American history, and 100% of all jobs created since I took office have been in the private sector. Think of that. 100% of all jobs have been in the private sector rather than government, which is the only way to make a country powerful and great. This historic trend will continue. Already, I've secured a record-breaking $18 trillion of investment into the United States, which means jobs, wage increases, growth, factory openings, and far greater national security. Much of this success has been accomplished by tariffs. My favorite word, tariffs, which for many decades have been used successfully by other countries against us, but not anymore. Companies know that if they build in America, there are no tariffs, and that's why they're coming home to the USA in record numbers. They're building factories and plants at levels we haven't seen, AI, automobiles. We're doing what nobody thought was even possible, not even remotely possible. There has never, frankly, been anything like it. 1 year ago, our country was dead. We were absolutely dead. Our country was ready to fail, totally failed. Now, we're the hottest country anywhere in the world, and that's said by every single leader that I've spoken to over the last 5 months. Next year, you will also see the results of the largest tax cuts in American history that were really accomplished through our great, big, beautiful bill, perhaps the most sweeping legislation ever passed in Congress. We wrapped 12 different bills up into one beautiful bill. That includes no tax on tips, no tax on overtime, and no tax on Social Security for our great seniors. Under these cuts, many families will be saving between $11,000 and $20,000 a year, and next spring is projected to be the largest tax refund season of all time. Because of tariffs, along with the just passed One Big Beautiful Bill, tonight I am also proud to announce that more than 1,450,000, think of this, 1,450,000 military service members will receive a special, we call Warrior Dividend before Christmas, a Warrior Dividend. In honor of our nation's founding in 1776, we are sending every soldier $1,776. Think of that. And the checks are already on the way. Nobody understood that one until about 30 minutes ago. We made a lot more money than anybody thought because of tariffs, and the bill helped us along. Nobody deserves it more than our military, and I say congratulations to everybody. And by the way, we now have record enlistment in our military, and last year we had among the worst recruitment numbers in our military's history. What a difference a year makes. In addition, I'm doing what no politician of either party has ever done, standing up to the special interests to dramatically reduce the price of prescription drugs. I negotiated directly with the drug companies and foreign nations, which were taking advantage of our country for many decades, to slash prices on drugs and pharmaceuticals by as much as 400, 500, and even 600%. In other words, your drug costs will be plummeting downward, and I used the threat of tariffs to get foreign countries who would never have done it to pay the cost of this giant dollar reduction. They stopped ripping us off, and it began as of 4 days ago. There has never been anything like this in the history of our country. Drugs have only gone up, but now they'll be going down by numbers never conceived possible. It's called Most Favored Nation, and no president has ever had the courage or ability to get this done until now. The first of these unprecedented price reductions will be available starting in January through a new website, trumprx.gov. And these big price cuts will greatly reduce the cost of health care. I'm also taking on the gigantic health insurance companies that have gotten rich on billions of dollars of money that should go directly to the people. The money should go to the people, that's you, so they can buy their own health insurance, which will give far better benefits at much lower costs. It will be far better health insurance. The current Unaffordable Care Act was created to make insurance companies rich. It was bad health care at much too high a cost, and you see that now in the steep increase in premiums being demanded by the Democrats, and they are demanding those increases, and it's their fault. It is not the Republicans' fault. It's the Democrats' fault. It's the Unaffordable Care Act, and everybody knew it. Again, I want the money to go directly to the people so you can buy your own health care. You'll get much better health care at a much lower price. The only losers will be insurance companies that have gotten rich, and the Democrat Party, which is totally controlled by those same insurance companies. They will not be happy, but that's okay with me, because you, the people, are finally going to be getting great health care at a lower cost. Another major focus is the cost of energy. For years, the radical left Democrats exploited the green energy scam as an excuse to funnel many billions of dollars into their own massive slush funds, as their energy restrictions drastically drove up prices, and they drove them up at record levels. Electricity costs surged 30 to 100% under Biden, and the typical family lost $5,000 to $10,000 in higher energy costs. Think of that, $5,000 to $10,000 you lost. On day one, I declared a national energy emergency. Gasoline is now under $2.50 a gallon in much of the country. In some states, it, by the way, just hit $1.99 a gallon. And within the next 12 months, we will have opened 1,600 new electrical generating plants, a record, and it's a record that won't be beaten by practically, I would say, by anybody, or certainly not very soon. Prices on electricity and everything else will fall dramatically. The Democrat inflation disaster, again, the worst in the history of our country, also robbed millions of Americans of home ownership and indeed the American dream. The yearly cost of a typical new mortgage increased by $15,000 under Democrat rule. In 11 months, we've already gotten that annual cost down by $3,000, and it's coming down a lot lower. Wait till you see. The numbers are going to be shocking. And I'll soon announce our next chairman of the Federal Reserve, someone who believes in lower interest rates by a lot, and mortgage payments will be coming down even further. Early, the new year, and you will see this, in the new year, I will announce some of the most aggressive housing reform plans in American history. A major factor in driving up housing costs was the colossal border invasion. We have never been invaded. This is the worst thing that, frankly, in my opinion, the worst thing that the Biden administration did to our country is the invasion at the border. The last administration and their allies in Congress brought in millions and millions of migrants and gave them taxpayer-funded housing while your rent and housing costs skyrocketed. Over 60% of growth in the rental market came from foreign migrants. At the same time, illegal aliens stole American jobs and flooded emergency rooms, getting free health care and education paid for by you, the American taxpayer. They also increased the cost of law enforcement by numbers so high that they are not even to be mentioned. For the first time in 50 years, we are now seeing reverse migration as migrants go back home, leaving more housing and more jobs for Americans. In the year before my election, all net creation of jobs was going to foreign migrants. Since I took office, 100% of all net job creation has gone to American-born citizens, 100%. In the end, government either serves the productive, patriotic, hardworking American citizen, or it serves those who break the laws, cheat the system, and seek power and profit at the expense of our nation. Look at Minnesota, where Somalians have taken over the economics of the state and have stolen billions and billions of dollars from Minnesota and indeed from the United States of America. And we're going to put an end to it. For so long as before my election, the vast majority of good and decent Americans were forced to watch as corrupt politicians plundered the halls of power, exploited our taxpayers, and pillaged every system that makes civilized society function. But not anymore, and you see that every day, not anymore. We're putting America first, and we are making America great again. Very simple. We are making America great again. Tonight, after 11 months, our border is secure. Inflation is stopped. Wages are up. Prices are down. Our nation is strong. America is respected. And our country is back, stronger than ever before. We're poised for an economic boom, the likes of which the world has never seen. Soon we will host the World Cup and the Olympics, both of which I got. But most importantly, we will celebrate the 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence. There could be no more fitting tribute to this epic milestone than to complete the comeback of America that began just 1 year ago. When the world looks at us next year, let them see a nation that is loyal to its citizens, faithful to its workers, confident to its identity, certain to its destiny, and the envy of the entire globe. We are respected again like we have never been respected before. To each and every one of you, have a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. God bless you all.
Okay, that was the President of the United States delivering an address to the nation. I think it goes without saying that there were a lot of falsehoods that were iterated in that speech. I probably I probably should have kept a list of all of them, but let's go over some of the big ones there. Trump basically repeated a lot of lies and false information that he has for the entire year. He's claiming $18 trillion in investments from foreign nations into the United States. That is not true. There may have been $18 trillion of investments promised to him, but there are no deals in writing, no punishments if those investments don't happen. They were just pledged to him. They have not happened. Some of the billions of dollars in investments from foreign companies actually isn't happening because of President Trump. It's happening because of the CHIPS Act, and companies are reinvesting in chip production here in the United States. The CHIPS and Science Act was actually enacted by Democrats and President Biden several years ago, and the impact of that is still accelerating as technological production is returning to the United States through tax incentives for companies like Intel, Nvidia, and others. Immigration, he touted border security. Obviously, illegal border crossings have dropped significantly. Part of that is because the president has frozen the asylum process, something that is legally dubious, but without approving any more asylum seekers, with the exception of Afrikaners or white South Africans, to my knowledge, there are no other asylum claims being approved at this time, and so that's what shut down a lot of immigration to the United States. The president also touched on the invasion at the southern border under President Biden. He also touched on that Biden wanted Congress to enact immigration reform, and he just did it himself instead. That's true. However, it was President Trump who killed that bill that was actually led and authored by Republicans, and killed that because he did not want any improvement at the southern border before Election Day, and largely that was a successful effort because that was one of the main reasons in which people said that they voted for President Trump. However, support for his immigration policies has fallen precipitously since taking office over the tactics that are being used, because to be perfectly honest, a fraction of the people that are being deported and taken into custody without due process are criminals. Again, many of the people that are being swept up and deported are following the legal asylum process. They're following the legal process and are not in the country illegally. They have not broken any laws. But those are the people, as well as others who may have had minor traffic infractions decades ago, are being swept up in these raids and leading to mass deportations. There's also been a elimination of the protections that were in place for DACA recipients as well. So again, the president is certainly no stranger to sharing false information. I think it goes without saying that that is expected from him. If you believe wholeheartedly in what President Trump has to say, obviously you'll listen to that and you'll either believe it or you'll sweep it under the rug for the sake of action. But at the end of the day, much of what he said was not true. Yes, inflation did reach over 9% under President Biden. It was below, I believe, 2.4, 2.6% by the time President Biden left office. That 9% inflation was terribly high, but it was below the inflation other nations were seeing because of the global supply chain issues post-pandemic, the peak of the pandemic. Inflation never got as high in the United States as it did in other countries. It assured was not record inflation by any stretch of the imagination. It was painful. It was painful. But that inflation was brought under control before President Biden left office. And since President Trump has returned to office, that inflation rate has begun to tick back up. And just about every economist will tell you it is tariffs that has caused that inflation to increase. And that has led the Federal Reserve into a terrible situation here economically. Let me see if I can explain this to you. The simplest way of explaining what the Fed does is they have to balance the health of the economy, and that includes the job market, that includes inflation, that includes other factors. And the general rule of thumb is that when an economy is beginning to flatline or to dip into a recession, job losses increase, inflation comes down because of a lack of demand and a lack of spending. And so then the idea is to lower interest rates in order to increase spending and increase investment. That's great for the job market, but we already have higher than we'd like to see inflation. So that's a problem. The Federal Reserve is opting to try and protect the job market, and that means that will put more pressure on inflation numbers to continue to rise, even if some of the tariffs do end up being pulled back by President Trump. So right now, inflation, I don't believe there's any indication inflation is going to be coming down anytime soon. Utility costs, food prices continue to rise at double-digit rates, and they have for the entire year. Gas prices, the president is correct in saying those are down. A lot of that, again, has to do with factors that presidents simply do not control. And the same is true with every president. The example here is when gas prices began rising quickly under President Biden, it happened at a time when Saudi Arabia was trying to inflate the price of oil by drastically cutting back on production. Towards the end of the Biden administration, that began to ease off and prices began to come down. And the reason was Saudi Arabia pulled back so much that they were losing business to the United States and other countries because America kept producing record oil production. And so we were doing more business. We were taking that from Saudi Arabia, and they were forced to flood the market with oil again. And as a result, over the past year, those oil prices have continued to come down, and so has the gas prices. Demand has also gone down as spending has gone down. The rise of electric vehicles, albeit small, has cut into the demand in gas, and that has also aided things. President Trump, though, has recently rolled back those EV mandates that happened under the Biden administration, and I believe just today, Ford announced that they were eliminating one of their all-electric pickups for a fuel or hybrid option. Now, reducing demand in electric vehicles undoubtedly will increase demand for gas, and so that may have a negative impact on prices. Again, this is speculation and likely an impact far, far down the road. But again, it goes without saying, President Trump has a very, let's say, difficult relationship with the truth. And if you support him, at this point, chances are you don't care. But the reality is what the president's speech there was trying to be was a victory lap for a year where the vast majority of Americans are not declaring victory for America. He's trying to say that his administration and his policies have been a huge win for the United States, and the majority of Americans, every poll shows, don't feel that way. The president is underwater on every issue that he campaigned and won on. The economy, inflation, even immigration, he's now underwater on in many polls. And so that is an indicator that this president is struggling to connect with Americans. What you didn't hear here, what you did hear from President Biden, even when they said they were doing everything right, is that they understood that people were hurting and they were trying to do what they could to fix that. That is something presidents throughout time have an easy time admitting, because you're also supposed to be the empathizer in chief. President Trump does not have an empathic bone in his body. We all know it. And so there was no acknowledgement in that speech of the suffering many Americans feel, especially financially. And that is not going to sit well as we are heading into a midterm year where Republicans are going to be desperate to find any progress. We have seen a small number of Republicans in Congress begin to turn on the president on many of his policies, whether it's his actions towards Venezuela, whether it's his economic policies, especially his tariffs. We saw here in Iowa, Senator Chuck Grassley again speak out against the tariffs that have drastically hurt farmers here in Iowa and the rest of the country. And again, they've had to be bailed out for a second time, like they did during the first Trump administration when he imposed tariffs on China. China is the biggest purchaser of American soybeans. Last year, they purchased over 24 billion in soybeans. This year, it was zero because of the tariffs. The president and Republicans touted a deal recently that restarted purchasing of soybeans from by China. But at last report, that was only at about 500,000 bushels. And I believe several billion bushels were promised by the end of the year. Well, the end of the year is in 2 weeks. I don't think that's going to happen. So there is a serious disconnect between what the president is claiming as working and what people are feeling. He is essentially suffering from the same issue that the Biden administration had when they said, we are doing things that are going to help the economy. We know you're hurting, but you've got to give us time. Well, the people did not give President Biden and did not give Vice President Harris the time as they reelected Donald Trump. Now, Donald Trump has been at the reins now for nearly a year. He has imposed economic policy faster and more stronger than any other president in the modern era because of his tariffs and now his tax cuts. And people, according to every poll I've seen, whether it's Associated Press, PBS, Fox News, Pew Research, every poll indicates that President Trump is not accepting the fact that people are not feeling any benefit from his economic policy, particularly the tariffs. Again, The president says it's bringing in billions of dollars into the U.S. economy, into the government coffers. That's true. But what he isn't honest about is where that comes from. Some studies have indicated about a third of that tariff money is coming from consumers, and the rest of it is being eaten by American corporations who are buying products overseas or buying components overseas for products they manufacture here. So those costs are at an impact to the American consumer or the American producer. And as time goes on and producers need to get their profits back up for investors, the fear is that more of that additional cost will be passed on to consumers, which will increase inflation, which will increase costs, and which will decrease overall spending in the US economy. We've already had one negative GDP this year. That does not make a recession, but there are fears that we could be close to, if not at a recession, near the midterms. And that would be calamitous for Republicans who are trying desperately to hold on to some form of power in Congress. And all signs point to they are at a severe disadvantage as of today. Of course, that can all change. Democrats are going to be quick to pounce on this speech, saying it was tone deaf. It didn't address any of the concerns and any of the pain that Americans are feeling, and they'll be right on that. And I believe that's a big reason why we're seeing President Trump's approval ratings fall to a level that we normally see his MAGA base. A lot of people believe his MAGA base represents about 20 to 30% of his supporters, and that's right around the number that we're seeing in his low levels of support now. So I don't think that tonight's speech is going to change any hearts and minds one way or the other. I don't think it's going to turn any of his supporters against him, and I don't think it's going to turn any of his detractors into his camp. I don't think this speech accomplishes anything other than giving President Trump the chance to beat his chest and say that he is winning for the American people, and no one is more successful at this than he is. And to be perfectly honest, the numbers just do not back that up. So let us know what you think. I know we've got a few people in here now. I thank you for joining us. Be sure and like and subscribe to the channel. We'd love to do more of this down the road. Feel free to share your thoughts in the chat. What did you think about the speech? Did you think it was good for the president? Do you think it will help boost his poll numbers? Do you think people are willing to give him more time? Or do you think that this was a whole nothing burger that's going to be nothing to people who are trying to make ends meet, especially over the holiday season? One thing we didn't hear about much was Venezuela, as the president has imposed a blockade of that country. And the president of Venezuela speaking earlier today saying that Trump has let the secret out and admits that this is all about oil and seizing land that he claims that Venezuela took from the United States. However, Venezuela didn't take American land. They control their own land. What he may be alluding to, somewhat crudely, is that several years ago, Venezuela kicked out American oil companies that were obtaining oil, purchasing or pulling oil from the ground in Venezuela, facilitating its production and sale, and kicked some of them out. But no land was taken by Venezuela that belonged to the United States. So we have a large naval presence now around Venezuela. We have more friction now with Venezuela's allies and Venezuela's neighbors, including Colombia. We also have to keep in mind Venezuela is supported by Russia, is supported by Iran. They do have a formidable military presence, not one that I think anyone suggests could rival the United States, but could impact any potential military action that could lead to a loss of life on the American side if Trump's threats turn into real military action inside Venezuela. And as for this talk of regime change, that is very nerve-wracking for Republicans who followed this president post-Iraq and post-Afghanistan and followed his message of no more foreign wars, no more wasting trillions of dollars in bringing democracy to other countries. They really rallied behind that cause. And so many of them are conflicted about what the president is doing in Venezuela right now and why now. We didn't get any clarification on that either tonight. Again, it was And again, I apologize. We were taking the White House feed, so that's why those charts kept popping up. I did take a quick peek at the networks who operate their own pool. They were not showing those graphics. Those graphics were either false or they were misleading. And I tried to spell out in some of the lower thirds as the speech was going on what I mean by that. But they were basically comparing a number during the Biden administration to a completely different number during the Trump administration. They were not the same number. They were not year over year or month to month or anything like that. They were completely taken out of context, or they were flat out false. And as we said, gas prices, again, yes, they've fallen a lot, but there are mostly external factors causing that, because it is a global cartel operated market. It is not an American market. So as we saw during the Biden administration, they were held hostage by OPEC when prices started rising. Same as President Bush after 9/11 and the Iraq War and Hurricane Katrina. We saw prices skyrocket on gas and never really come back down. And a lot of that has to do with foreign influence over the global market. The United States likes to think that it can control these markets, but the brutal honesty is we don't. We don't control the supply chain. We don't control the oil markets. We can be a factor in it, but we are not the arbiter of those markets around the world. So that's where it stands. I think we got from this speech what we thought we were going to get. It was a declaration of victory. It was a claim that everything President Trump has done in the past year has been wildly successful and is causing the economy to boom. The economy is not booming. Jobs are falling. Inflation remains a little high and has been climbing a little bit. Not ridiculous, though. And really, the only positive economic indicator I've seen out there is that gas prices have fallen. But if people aren't seeing it, one thing the president did mention is that average income in the United States has risen faster than inflation. I believe he said 3.6% year over year is the wage growth that Americans on average have seen, 3.6%, whereas inflation, I believe, is now at 3.1%. If that's wrong, please somebody correct me in the chat. So it is outpacing it a little bit, but we saw wage growth outpacing inflation during the last year and a half of the Biden administration as well. And the wage growth was higher. In fact, I believe it was CNBC reporting today that the wage growth that the president was declaring victory on was the lowest wage growth in 4 years. And we're already seeing job losses at a rate not seen since the pandemic 5 years ago. So a lot of indicators that affect Americans are just not showing up as prices continue to climb. The other issue is, I believe some of the biggest gains in jobs were in the construction sector, but there are warning signs there as purchasing by construction, the construction sector is falling. And a lot of that has to do with tariffs. We're seeing a big impact on that in other sectors, partially because of tariffs and also because a lot of these companies front loaded their inventory before the tariffs took effect and have now pulled back on purchasing because they're hoping to weather the storm until maybe some of these tariffs come back down. And we have seen some of the tariffs be removed by President Trump, but they are still high enough that they are going to be painful if they stay in effect through the year. So we also didn't hear any specific policy that the president is going to do. He talked about stimulus checks for service members in the coming days. Excuse me, that was something that had leaked out just before the speech, and then bragged about the tax cuts that they've enacted, which could be a boon for the American consumer, absolutely. However, the flip side of that is deficit spending. Deficits are climbing under President Trump, just like they did during his first term. Biden brought deficits that had reached record levels during the pandemic down quickly, and now they're going back up because of these unpaid for tax cuts going somewhat to the American middle class, largely to the top 1% that are going to get the biggest share of this tax cut. And again, wealthy people don't create a lot of jobs. The companies they own create a lot of jobs, but personal wealth doesn't really have a lot to do with that. So we'll have to see if that actually creates jobs. But as we saw with the tax cuts that Republicans enacted in 2017, I believe, that never came to fruition, and the tax cuts added more than $2 trillion to the national debt that has still not been paid for. Justin RC says tons of blue collar jobs in manufacturing have gone into layoffs. Yes, we have seen thousands of manufacturing layoffs here in Iowa alone. Deere and Company, a lot of meatpacking plants. We've seen a lot of job losses here in Iowa, and we're seeing that grow across the country. During the Biden administration, we saw the first growth in manufacturing jobs in a very long time. It wasn't a lot, but we saw the efforts by the administration to bring manufacturing back to the U.S. in specific sectors where it made supply chain and cost effectiveness sense. And so that didn't necessarily help the traditional, say, Rust Belt manufacturing area of the country, but overall, it did bring some of these lower skilled, good paying jobs back to the United States. And we're not seeing that continue over the last year as tariffs have really taken their toll. And we've seen those layoffs now accelerate across the country. So is it 64,000 jobs created last month, according to the Bureau of Labor and Statistics, but far more jobs were lost in the months prior. And I believe we're sitting at about 1.1 million jobs lost in at least the last 6 to 10 months, as those job losses have accelerated since the president's initial tariff announcement back in April. So thanks for that comment. Yes, you're absolutely right. We've seen a lot of layoffs and a lot of cuts in manufacturing, both here in Iowa, the rest of the Midwest, the rest of the country. Most of the new investment has come in the form of data centers and AI centers. We've seen construction here in Iowa begin on some of that, but these don't create a lot of jobs. They do create a fair amount of construction jobs, but once everything is constructed, these places operate on a skeletal staff. They don't create a lot of jobs in a community for not just the space they take up, but the resources they take up. I'm just outside of Cedar Rapids. There is a nuclear power plant that was shut down several years ago because it had gone past its life cycle. There is now a deal with the owner of that power plant to restart it for the sake of data center and AI plant power generation. And there's some mixed feelings about that. I will say that statistically, nuclear power remains one of the safest out there. But it still has a very fearful downside. And, miniseries like Chernobyl on HBO a few years ago really reignited the concern over nuclear plants. Now, I want to be very clear, what happened at Chernobyl could absolutely never happen at an American nuclear power plant, but that doesn't make them flawless. Of course, in 1979, I believe we had the Three Rivers incident in Pennsylvania of a partial meltdown that was fortunately stopped. Safety measures always improve, but there's always that trade-off. But bottom line is nuclear power is extremely clean. You just have to make sure that it is contained appropriately so that something like a meltdown like Chernobyl or Fukushima after the tsunami in 2011 in Japan doesn't happen here. I can tell you that nuclear plant was in operation when the record flood hit Cedar Rapids in 2008, and there was real fear about what it would do to that plant because it's right along the Cedar River. Fortunately, it was very well protected, and there was no risk of the flood water getting in and impacting its cooling systems or its reactors along the Cedar River. If anyone else has any comments, feel free to share them. Again, like and subscribe to the channel. It's the best way to support us. We do a lot of weather coverage here in Iowa. Fortunately, things have calmed down after several rounds of snow, and now it looks like after all the snow we've received this month, we're not gonna have a white Christmas. 40, believe the current forecast here for Christmas is in the low to mid 40s. It's going to be a brown Christmas for Iowa, but we got a long way to go. We love tracking the weather, whether it's winter weather, severe weather. I've been storm chasing for 25 years. I love it. And I love bringing coverage here. But we also like to cover news and politics and the things that people are talking about. And we'd love to do more of that with your support. Some other big developments today that, again, were not talked about. Special counsel Jack Miller, former special counsel, I should say, Jack Smith, testified on Capitol Hill today. He wanted to testify in public about the case he felt proved that President Trump committed criminal acts in the lead up and during the January 6th insurrection. Republicans refused to hold that hearing in public and instead held it behind closed doors and have been largely silent. However, we did get excerpts of Jack Smith's opening statement. And I believe at least one Democrat has said that it was damning. Republicans obviously are going to be on defense. They've been trying to label Jack Smith as a political witch hunt, despite his record of corruption, prosecution, and a nonpartisan career in criminal justice. So we don't know if we're going to hear any more of that. I would presume so long as Republicans are in control of the Congress, we are not going to see Jack Smith testify in public. There is an ongoing fight to release the evidence that was collected in this case since it's been dropped. But I believe even Jack Smith does not want that information out, as prosecution could move forward once President Trump is out of office in 2029. That's right. Another big development is going to come on Friday. You'll recall that Congress finally, after the shutdown, passed a bill demanding the release of the Epstein files from the Department of Justice. President Trump did sign that. The deadline to release those files is Friday. What will be in those files? We don't know. We don't know what's been redacted. There have been multiple reports that President Trump's name and his involvement in those files has been heavily redacted, despite the fact that, by all accounts, President Trump had nothing to do with any of the potential illegal activity of Jeffrey Epstein. He may or may not have been aware of it. And so we don't know what we're going to get and if they're going to adhere to that deadline, because if they don't adhere to that deadline, they answer to Congress, and leaders in Congress have almost universally sided with the president and given him leeway on this and many other items. I believe the record for the most inactive quote unquote do nothing Congress only passed a few dozen or a couple of hundred bills in a year. That was the most inactive Congress. This year's Congress passed five bills. That's it. This has been a Congress that has, whether you support it or not, you have to admit they have ceded much of their authority and much of their power to President Trump. President Biden felt he could not do drastic changes to immigration policy without Congress enacting legislation. And he may be right, because many of the things that President Trump has done without Congress has been challenged, and some of it has been struck down in court. Going through Congress the way you're supposed to eliminates most of that. Because if there's a law in the books, even to this day, if Congress were ever to pass a law that said abortion was legal in the United States, it would overturn the Supreme Court, because the Supreme Court ruled in Roe v. Wade, and then later in Planned Parenthood v. Casey, when they overturned Roe v. Wade, those were all enacted without federal legislation. There could still be legislation that bans abortion or legalizes abortion. Congress simply doesn't choose to act one way or the other. And they have brought it back to the states, and that has been somewhat chaotic over the last 4 years. But again, this has been an ineffectual Congress. They do not enact legislation, period. They have not really enacted anything other than what President Trump calls the big beautiful bill, that included tax cuts and funding for other presidential priorities. But there was a lot of things in there that were seen as poison pills that got souped up in it. And it still took a while to pass, because it took a while for Republicans to get on board. But the impacts of that have certainly not turned around the poll numbers for President Trump at all since it was enacted I want to say 6 months ago. 5 months ago. just going to check and see some of the early reaction. Not really seeing much in the way of reaction here. One new development in Venezuela, we're seeing reports that Maduro, President Nicolas Maduro, has deployed the Venezuelan Navy to reportedly escort oil tankers through the blockade zone, basically daring the president and the U.S. military to attempt to intervene. A U.S. official, this is from the New York Times, a U.S. official says Washington is aware of the escorts and is, quote, considering various courses of action. Earlier this evening, Democrats put forth a bill in the House to authorize military action against Venezuela, and it was resoundingly struck down because Republicans, many do not want to go on the record in support of action against Venezuela. And there's a lot of question as to what President Trump can do without authority from Congress. Now, I believe what the Constitution states and the War Powers Act of 1978 states is that the president can act unilaterally for a period of time without consulting and seeking authorization from Congress. So there is a potential here that the president thinks he can do whatever he wants to do in Venezuela for maybe 45 days before he would need to get approval from Congress. And so in terms of actually conducting military strikes against Venezuela, I believe the president has the authority to do that. And they may try and go past that 45 days by arguing that this somehow falls under the authorized use of military force against terrorism. We saw the president issue an executive order saying fentanyl was a weapon of mass destruction. Now that can provide them some legal cover, but at the end of the day, I don't know if that will change the minds of anyone currently opposed to action against Venezuela. But we are looking at the potential conflict between two navies, the United States and Venezuela. As the New York Times again is reporting, Venezuela has begun escorting their oil tankers through the blockade. The U.S. says it's aware of the escorts, has not provided any details other than that they're considering various courses of action. Venezuela is a somewhat more advanced military nation than what we're used to. However, it's unclear what level of support that they would receive from their top allies, of course, that being Iran and Russia. Governor Gavin Newsom of California, who's been a staunch critic of the president and adopting his trolling policies, simply said in a statement, "This could have been an email." Other liberals saying this is embarrassing, mostly for him, but honestly for all of America. Some saying that the president, by speaking in primetime on national television, did Democrats a favor. Let's see if we can find Surprisingly little reaction I'm seeing right now. Sorry, I'm trying to reach around my microphone here. And it's not letting me. Many still talking about the rejection of a war powers or use of force resolution in the House today against Venezuela, that failing by 2 votes. Um, I apologize. Twitter is not a great source of reaction because it doesn't do a good job of showing me the sources that I follow. Apologies for the long pauses here. We do have some of the updates on some of the false information spread. As we mentioned, the $18 trillion being invested in the United States, that is not true. That is complete fiction. The White House has released a list of investments that comes nowhere near that number. And all of these are pledges. They are countries saying we're going to do this with no contractual obligation, no penalty if they actually don't do it. These were just empty promises given to the president that he could go and tout. European Union confirming there is no commitment to invest $600 billion in the United States. They said they have not invested even a cent. That was never told to the White House or to President Trump, and that will never materialize. There is no commitment. Expected to is not a commitment, one economist said. So Trump again pushed giving money to people to buy health insurance and not giving it to insurance companies. That effort again failed in the House this week. That is not moving forward. The problem with that is that the Americans who get that money would still have to give it to insurance companies and buy their own insurance outside of the workplace, where most people get subsidized health care through their employer. That's a system we created decades ago, and I haven't seen anyone present a plan to change that, minus, of course, someone like Senator Bernie Sanders and universal health care. One analyst, Jeff Zeleny of CNN, said for President Trump, the buck still stops with Joe Biden. It's been 331 days, but Trump remains just as fixated on blaming his predecessor for the nation's economic challenges as he did during the opening days of his term. And there is no sign Americans are buying it. The latest poll of polls finds 39% support President Trump's actions so far during this year. And those numbers have been steadily falling for some time. Trump again reiterated more false claims about wars he allegedly ended. That is a full exaggeration. The conflict between Egypt and Ethiopia was never a war. It was just a diplomatic dispute about a tributary on the Nile River. He also talks about Serbia and Kosovo. That was a war that never happened. And there is no indication what the White House or the Trump administration actually did to change anything over a dispute between those two nations. He also lists Democratic Republic of Congo and Rwanda, but that war is ongoing despite a peace agreement, which was brokered by the Trump administration. However, it was never signed by one of the warring sides, and that fight continues. Thailand and Cambodia, there was a peace agreement there earlier this year. However, that has broken down into new fighting this week. And again, Trump declaring victory on the economy. Americans simply are not buying that, as affordability concerns have skyrocketed in the last several months. So I don't, I'm not sure what else there is to say. I see our viewership has gone down, and I think that is our cue to wrap things up here. Again, I want to thank everybody that's joined us. You really help the channel by joining us for these live streams and putting up with our technical issues. We do appreciate it. We hope this gives you an option that you can choose every now and then if you just want to have a more intimate setting to watch things like this, and share some dialogue when you want to. That's always appreciated. So again, I want to thank everyone for joining us for this chat, and we will certainly do more of this in the future as long as we have support. So again, liking the videos, subscribing to the channel, best way you can help us out. And until next time, thanks everyone for joining us.